I've been very fortunate in my life to have many wonderful outdoor adventures. And when I talk about them, usually I focus on the wonder, the inspiration of it all. But today I'd like to take a different tack. I'd like to focus on the difficulty, the obstacles, the hardship. Since I could stand, I've been on skis, so I had an early introduction to the mountain life and the outdoors. I joined Scouts and I rose through the ranks, made Eagle Scout, and went on to become Scoutmaster today of the same Boy Scout troop. After my sophomore year of high school, we spent a week on the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire. It was tough, but I loved it. And my father was on that trip. A little bit about my parents. Here's a photo of them from the 1960s. They look like an average American couple. In fact, they are immigrants from Poland. And when World War II began, my mom was 4 years old. My dad was 9 years old. My mom spent the war in Nazi-occupied Poland and to this day still feels uncomfortable around German shepherds. And my dad was, with his family, deported to the Arctic Circle by Stalin and the Soviet military, along with 1 million other Poles. So my sister, my brother, and I, growing up with our parents' history and their example, did not feel like we really had the right to complain about small stuff, given what they had gone through. After my junior year of high school, I took an outward bound course, 23 days alpine mountaineering in the North San Juan range of the Colorado Rockies. And when I graduated from university, I took an 83-day wilderness leadership semester with the Colorado Outward Bound School, which comprised winter backpacking in the Colorado Rockies, canyoneering in Canyonlands National Park in Utah, river rafting down the Green and Colorado rivers, and rock climbing in Joshua Tree National Park in California. After graduate school, I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail, starting in Georgia and finishing in Maine. 14 states, took me 6 months, 2,163 miles. And after that, I had to think about how I could continue to have outdoor adventures, but in a shorter time frame. So I started climbing higher mountains. This is Mount Rainier in Washington State, and it's a great mountain for learning how to climb higher mountains. You gain the same skills there that you do on higher mountains. And so I started climbing the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each continent. And I have 5 under my belt so far. Mount Everest in Russia is the highest mountain in Europe. Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. Denali, up in Alaska, is the highest mountain in North America. Aconcagua, down in Argentina, the highest mountain in South America, and in fact, the highest mountain outside of the Himalaya. And then Everest. It was great being in Nepal, where I was able to experience the kindness of the Nepali and Sherpa people. Dorjee Sherpa was one of the guides on the trip. At the time of this photo, he had summited Everest 17 times. The peace of the Buddhist religion you can see throughout Nepal. And of course, the spectacular beauty of the Himalaya. I did make it to the top. It was a 50-day expedition. But I'd like to go back a couple years first, to 2014. An avalanche blew through the Khumbu icefall on the lower reaches of Everest and killed 16 Sherpa, ending the climbing season that year. The following year, in 2015, an enormous earthquake hit Nepal, killing over 9,000 people and injuring over 22,000. An avalanche blew through Everest Base Camp, killing 18 climbers and injuring many more. It was at that time that I was considering signing up for my own Everest expedition. And I thought to myself, maybe the mountain doesn't want to be climbed right now. But soon afterwards, Adventure Consultants, the high-altitude guiding service that I was thinking of going with, sent an earnest appeal. And they said, the Sherpa want us to come back. They want us to climb the mountain. It's their livelihood. I signed up, and on April 3rd, 2016, I started my trek. It begins in the mountain town of Lukla. It's just over 9,000 feet high. And it takes you 10 days to get to Everest Base Camp, which is at 17,388 feet. Just getting to Everest Base Camp is an accomplishment in itself at that altitude. On the 5th day of your expedition, you walk into the town of Parachet, and there's a memorial there to all the climbers who have passed away on the mountain, over 280 people. And it reawakened in you the danger that you were putting yourself into. On the 7th day of the trek, I started feeling not too well. That night I had hyperventilated, and during the day I was feeling weak and a little nauseated. The following day I felt a little worse, weaker, nauseated, sick to my stomach. Our objective that day was to climb up Chukung Ri, a nearby mountain, for an acclimatization hike. I didn't make it. And that evening, the lead guide, Mike Roberts, diagnosed me with low-level acute mountain sickness. He put me on a high-altitude drug known as Diamox, along with Cipro and Imodium. The next day, it hadn't kicked in yet, and I felt even worse, and it was all I could do to put one foot in front of the other, as we had to get over the highest pass that we encountered thus far at 18,000 feet, Kongmala Pass. I had to skip off the trail 3 times due to an upset stomach, and it was a rough day. But fortunately, the medications did kick in, and I got over it. We arrived at base camp day 10, and at Everest Base Camp, when you wake up in the morning, and the sun is shining on the snow on the valley walls, you hear avalanches crashing down around you. You hear helicopters flying, and you're wondering whether they're just doing resupplies or whether they're picking up distressed climbers. In fact, 2 members of my team were medevaced out by helicopter because they got pulmonary edema, which is fluid in the lungs, a life-threatening condition. That's our base camp, and the tent in front is the base camp doctor's tent. He was a busy guy. We were all sick with something at some point. A lot of us had what's called the Khumbu cough, which because of the dry air and the dusty trails, you get this cough that you just can't kick. And then we went higher up on the mountain. You get up at 11 o'clock at night, you have breakfast at midnight, and you're hiking by 1 o'clock in the morning. You want to go through the Khumbu icefall at night when it's frozen and it's stuck together and it's less likely to fall down on you. But then the sun rises and you look down on Everest Base Camp below. And you make your way through the Khumbu. to the top of the Khumbu, and then to Camp 1. From Camp 1, you go up this sunny valley called the Western Khum, and it takes you to Camp 2. On this day at Camp 2, I arrived and I sat down in the dining tent, and Khumbu cough, almost everybody has it. Mine wasn't going away. And 3 hours later, I was still coughing. And essentially, I was having an asthma attack. And I just couldn't calm down my air pipes. They were just really delicate and spasming. Mike Roberts, the lead guide, called over an expedition doctor from a nearby camp, and she listened to my lungs. And she said, the good news is I don't think it's pulmonary edema. Ended up being on an antibiotic, 2 different inhalers. We still had a few days up there and then went back down to base camp for our acclimatization regimen. Now is time for our summit push. And here I am at high camp. This is 26,000 feet, known as the South Col. Now we're in what's called the death zone. Every minute you spend up there without oxygen, you're essentially dying. On the evening of May 19th, headed out around 10:15 p.m. You want to get up and down off the summit early. Generally, the bad weather on Everest moves in the afternoon. So we headed up at 10:15 p.m. and hiked throughout the night. You can see the trail. That's the balcony. Somewhere above the balcony, we came to this rocky outcrop, and we got stuck in traffic. There was a line of climbers in front of us, and you have to go over this rocky outcrop one at a time. You go to Everest to get away from all the crowds, and then you're stuck in traffic at around 27,000 feet. And we stood there for an hour, not moving, wondering whether we'd be able to stay warm enough and whether our digits would stay warm enough. We got moving, and we reached the summit at 6:10 in the morning. It was a beautiful morning, sunny, but it was a bit cold at minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. With wind, minus 40 degrees. On the top of Everest, there's 1/3 the amount of oxygen that there is at sea level. So almost everyone wears oxygen. As you can see, I'm wearing oxygen there. You don't want to linger up there. Bad things can happen in the death zone. So we spent 20 minutes and then we headed down. It took 8 hours to get up. It took about 3 hours to get back down to high camp. Got into high camp, rehydrated, ate some ramen, packed up my stuff, and by noon, we were on our way back down to Camp 2. Arrived at Camp 2 around 5:30 p.m., had some dinner, went to bed, got up at 3:30 in the morning, hiking by 5:30 in the morning, back down to base camp by 11:30 in the morning. We celebrated that night, and then it was a helicopter ride down to Kathmandu. So why? Why endure all of this hardship and difficulty? Well, if you're following your dreams, if you're doing what you love, you understand that these obstacles are an inevitable part of the journey. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. Like the stock market, risk is proportional to reward. Low risk, low reward. Higher risk, potential for higher reward. In scouting, we like to use this teaching tool. There's 3 circles. In the inner circle is the safety zone. You're very safe there. You're very comfortable. But there's not a lot of learning going on and hardly any adventure. The next outer circle is the stretch zone. And this is where learning happens. This is where the adventure is. This is where you have to push your boundaries. This is where you stretch yourself. Life can be exciting here. You don't want to get out into the outer circle, which is the danger zone, where your mental and physical abilities shut down and nothing's happening. But it is adventurous to get close to the boundary in the stretch zone. In the end, it takes grit. It takes endurance. It takes pushing through hardship. And if you have that grit, you become resilient. And resilience is really important because it enables you to deal with the setbacks that you're going to have in life. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, a natural disaster. It will happen, but if you have grit and you're resilient, you can handle it. You can accomplish your goals. And there are many wonderful goals to accomplish, whether it's marrying the person you love, or getting into the college of your choice, or getting a promotion at work, buying a house, losing weight, running a marathon, climbing Mount Everest. Whatever your goals are, it's going to require grit and resilience. And ultimately, those things are going to lead to self-esteem, self-confidence, and inner peace. Jim Whittaker was the first American to climb Mount Everest in 1963. And he likes to say, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Sometimes you're going to be on the edge, and that's where you're going to experience the fullness of life. Thank you.